First of all, let me express my thanks to Dr. Patel for having taken the time off his busy schedule to come and talk to us.
You started your work or a relationship in 1998 with a fellowship under the Fund for Population Development, and then there were subsequent grants that were given for different projects to Sangath. And we're very pleased to host this meeting, this talk, and I think this is an issue which is of great interest to many people here, counselors, others who work with young people, and I think you'll find it interesting. So with that, I'll just say a few words about Vikram. I know you may have already received his bio, but just very briefly, Vikram Patel is a psychiatrist at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in London, and he's a joint director for the Centre for the Control of Chronic Conditions at the Public Health Foundation of India. He's the founder of Sangath, which is an NGO based in Goa, but which works in many parts of India now. And he has served on several Government of India committees and bodies. His most recent accomplishment or achievement has been that he's been named as one of the, how do you say this? He's been named to the one of the 100 most influential people of by
which I thought actually captured very well exactly what every parent imagines their teenager's brain is comprises of. So if you look at this wonderful character, you'll see right in the front of his head, half of it is occupied by the birds and the bees lobe. And then you'll see very interesting other sections of the brain, the super turbo rebellion center, I thought really struck true for many of us here. There's a cool gauge, etc. There's a big section for memory of music. And importantly, there is a little section for love of parents. It's there, it's deeply hidden inside there, and I've got a sample of the brain to show you where that might be. It's somewhere there, but it's there, but it's very small and it's almost invisible. But on a more serious note, and we have to get serious at some point, is the fact that actually we do know more than this cartoonist does about the teenage brain. And I'm here to really, in a way, to summarize what we do know about the teenage brain that is actually changing, turning on its head literally, our previous conceptions or misconceptions about the brain in adolescence. And I've really based a lot of my thinking on not just years and years of reading the literature, but this superb book. For those of you who are interested more in this particular topic, this book was only published a few weeks ago. And it's written both from a perspective of neuroscientists, but also the perspective of a parent. And I think it's one of the best descriptions of how brain development affects a whole range of issues in young people's lives, mental health being only one of them. There are a variety of other issues as well, such as, for example, sexual health. So let me start with certain myths that at least I, as a doctor, and maybe some of you have been taught when you were growing up. The first myth about the teenage brain is that actually it's a pretty static organ. We were taught in medical school that really most, if not all, of brain development finishes by middle childhood. And as a consequence, virtually all the interest in the brain developing was focused on the first 5 years of life. This included the science that went into this field. It also included the health interventions. So we focused so much on nurturing the newborn child in the first few years. And of course, it's a very important window of life for brain development. But somehow we had this idea that the brain magically stops developing by the age of about 8 or 9. So teenagers were the way they were because of their hormones. This was, of course, the most popular theory, is that they were supercharged by estrogen in girls and testosterone in boys, and this was what was making them as incorrigible, irascible, and exasperating. So these are both myths that now we can debunk because of some facts. The facts are, first of all, that the brain is plastic. Now, what does that mean? It means, just like plastic, it can be bent. It is malleable. And there's a good and also a not so good consequence of that plasticity. What it simply means is that the brain is responding to the environment around it exquisitely, and is doing so both physically, for example, by setting up more neurons, actual physical parts of the brain, cells of the brain, but also functionally, and that's perhaps even more important in terms of the connections that the brain actually has. The neurons, how they speak to each other, how they connect to each other. And so we know the brain is very plastic, and I'll return to this point because it really tells us a lot about not only why sometimes teenagers land into trouble, but also more importantly, what we can do to prevent it. And secondly, that the whole of the brain doesn't magically mature one fine day. In fact, it matures in stages, and this is extremely important to remember. It matures from back to the front. So let me go back to this brain. This is not a real brain, it's just a model. So this is the front half of the brain, this is the back half of the brain, this is the back, this is the front. Now, what typically happens is that the brain matures starting from the back and the base and gradually works its way over 5 or 6 years to the front of the brain. And I'm going to show you the same changes by showing you some brain images so you get a better sense of how that happens. So this particular slide shows you 5 images of the human brain from age 5 on the top left-hand corner, and then if you work your way in a zigzag, you have age 8, age 12, 16, and 20. And as you see, the bluish portion keeps increasing as you grow older. The bluish portion simply tells you what the concentration of gray and white matter is. And these are the two different substances of the brain, as it were. The white matter is what defines the connections between different neurons.